All right, what it is, how's everyone doing? It's been a couple weeks, hope you're doing okay. You can text me, you have my number. You can call me during office hours or at other times that we agree on, just not late at night or too early in the morning, basically. And I'm here for you. Your papers are due Thursday or Friday. I won't mark it late as long as it's there before the weekend. In fact, I'm not going to mark it late at all, but I would like you to do your stuff on time just so I'm not worried that you're not going to do any of it at all and then you don't have as good a chance of passing as if you do your work. So please, please, please be working on those papers. I've heard from a few of you. Um, See here, I have a handy dandy board. Let me see if I can fuss with the lighting. Maybe that's better. Is that better? I guess not really. There we go. And I'll get to that in a second. Other things to remember, let me get these books and show you some. Starting next week, we're reading these books. First, this one by Sigmund Freud, A Case of Hysteria, often known by the patient who it's about. Her name that she's given in the book is Nora. Her real name is Ida Bauer. And then, or sorry, not Nora, Dora. Excuse me, I was thinking of adults. Dora. And then Psychoanalysis: The Impossible Profession by Janet Malcolm. This you only find in this edition. This you could find in a lot of different editions. Much older book. Freud himself. Okay, so we'll be reading this slowly. You can skip the intro. It's very long. It's it's very controversial what Freud said to his early patients. So there's a lot of hemming and hawing and admonishing him and remonstrances and whatever. And so we can skip all the way to this middle part here to start. All right, and that's page 3 in the overall text. So you can skip that whole intro, just do the forward. Just read the part Freud did, and I would just read up to the first dream, if that's clear. Read up to page 53 for next week. I'm sorry the reading was so difficult this week on the Marx. I'm not expecting you to write about it or anything. I hope you gave it a shot. We'll talk about the beginning, the middle, and the end to some extent tonight, and then we'll also discuss these Gould essays. But let's start right away with just reviewing what Marx is about and why I'm teaching him in conjunction with Stephen Jay Gould. But I'll start with Marx tonight. Marx was born in 1818. He died, and I'm talking about this dude here. He died in 1883. We're going to discuss tonight his funeral and what this young conservative, that is his political opponent, was doing there. How could they be friends and so on? And as I was saying last week, and this comes up in some of the reads, Marx was a student of capitalism. He gave a lot of credit to capitalism, but he also thought that capitalism was ultimately, because it serves the interests of such a narrow few, it ultimately holds back the same potential it unleashed. And that the way to unleash that potential for the good of all was to keep industrialization, keep modern scientific innovation going, but do it in favor of working people, in favor of the common good. And that system's been called communism. It has had mixed, if not totally discredited, record as a governing system. I'm not here to defend the excesses of Stalinism and Mao. That, if you read the readings tonight, that's what part of what I'm trying to get you to understand is where it went wrong. But at the same token, I don't want us to think of Marx as inevitably leading to that. Okay, and being the simple-minded person, because we are in a crisis right now. Not just the current one, which is becoming a crisis of capitalism, but the crisis overall of climate change, where we have to think beyond the market mechanism. At least that's the way I, in my research and study of things, have come to conclude that the situation needs to be addressed. And it's necessary. And you see this right now when there's a crisis, the government taking power and to some extent suspending the normal rules of the market during the crisis. Okay, so back to what we're saying about Marx. Marx is often criticized for being a reductionist, meaning, I'm trying to spell that more clearly where you can read it, meaning he thinks everything comes down to the economy and the relations of the economy. Everything's an expression of that. Culture, politics don't influence the economy. They are influenced by the economy. The economy is the prime mover. This economic reductionism and economic determinism. And that's, he's criticized for not bringing up how race plays a role in who gets oppressed, and how that was always a stumbling block in the labor movement in the United States, for example, this racial caste system within the working class. Marx is said, especially in the wake of the Soviet Union falling apart, he's said to have been unable to see the prevalence, the sort of prominence of nationalism, and the way in which people will identify with a nation rather than a class position. So he doesn't see very much. He supposedly can't see race, and he can't see nationalism very well. And I agree maybe on the race thing. And then, of course, feminists will tell you that the movement was always very patriarchal, male-dominated. And for as much as they did for the cause of women, they often overlooked it or saw it as just a bourgeois freedom and not true, real freedom for the people and so on. So the point of the reading tonight, and really some of the Renaissance and studying Marx these days, is that Marx actually does have a theory of nationalism, and it comes out of this essay we're reading. Okay, he does have this theory, and the essay has a strange title. It's called "The 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte." Who is Louis Bonaparte, and what's the 18th of Brumaire? Okay, so good question. The 18th of Brumaire refers to, I just erased it because it got a little messy, but let me put it back now. The 18th of Brumaire refers to a date earlier in history before Marx is born, right? If Marx is born in 1818, we're talking November 9th, 1799. This is the day Napoleon declares himself emperor. The original Napoleon, okay? Not this guy. This is his nephew. Or they're even like less related than that technically, but whatever. And this or rather, and you want to use modern terms, not emperor, but dictator. He becomes a sort of dictator, representing the interests of all these different classes that are normally opposed, okay? And now, that Napoleon was a great man. He was an outstanding military general. He conquered a lot of different places. He was a heroic figure in France. And this guy is his sort of sad, distant cousin echo. Imagine like if Donald Trump's, I don't know, step half cousin 30, 40 years from now becomes president, calling himself Trump again. And we think Trump is pathetic now, but imagine that the person's even worse or something like that. No, Louis Bonaparte is his nephew, but not technically. It's his stepdaughter's son. So it would be his his grandson if it was like his normal daughter's kid, but it's his stepdaughter's kid. So it's more like they called him his nephew, essentially. And he was a loser. Because Napoleon is defeated, he rules from here until 1815, then he's defeated. Napoleon, his family sent into exile. And at this time, in 1815, what's called the Bourbon Restoration. That is the people who had ruled France before the French Revolution. Okay, that goes up until 1830, when there's what's called the July Revolution and the July Monarchy. These are different factions of the this board's becoming comical. Different fractions of the French aristocracy, the princes and princesses, the dukes, the traditional wealthy people in French society. Okay, and these, if you've been reading the text, these are these two factions. They're often called the Orleanists, and they represent big property owners. They held sway in this world, and under this, in the Orleanist government, it was more bankers and industrialists, more like how modern capitalism works now. That's who's in charge. Okay, and they basically rule until a failed revolution in 1848, around the time Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. Failed revolution, brief, that is, working people arose up and were defeated. Brief, very brief, 3-year brief republic, and then voila, a new Napoleon, and then Louis Bonaparte coup. Okay, so that's the events here. And Marx wrote the essay for an American newspaper. It was a series of articles about the coup and the events behind it, and so that what's the day what day is this actually in his life where he becomes the new Napoleon? On December 1st, 1851. He becomes the new Napoleon III. He starts a new empire. He rules much longer than Marx realized or thought he would. He rules for almost 20 years. It ends in total defeat and humiliation at the hands of Bismarck. But this notion Marx is asking is, how does a mediocrity become a hero? In what class relation, what class struggle elements lead to this? What class struggle elements lead to a mediocre person becoming the emperor, the hero? Strangely enough, they're the same class struggle elements that we encounter in modern America. And there's a way in which what Marx is describing with Louis Bonaparte is very, very similar to Trump. Okay, it's super similar to Trump. So that, for example, Trump's coalition and his messaging are they parallel almost exactly the ones that Louis Bonaparte capitalized on. They both use a mix of nostalgia, make America great again. Remember the Napoleonic greatness of the empire at the beginning of the century. That nostalgia combined with with resentment of foreigners and elites. So for Bonaparte, that was the monarchy, that was the aristocracy, the nobility. Okay, the monarchists, he was gonna represent the people against them, and it was also to some extent socialists and radicals in cities like Paris, who were seen as essentially foreigners, like Jewish and so on. And then for Trump, as you know, it's immigrants, and also to some extent women and gays and Jews and all the normal, you know, scapegoats. That is, oppressed, marginal groups that are then blamed for all of society's ills, when in fact they're the victims of it. Okay, so Trump calls Mexicans, you know, rapists and murderers, when in fact, hello, they're the ones picking all the food that's going on your plate every day. And it's actually the rich and powerful like himself who are causing most of the problems in society and not really doing anything for anyone's benefit. So I'm going to come back at you and read you the beginning of the text, and then I'm going to have another video on the end, and then two more on, and then another video on Stephen Jay Gould. Okay, take it easy and see you in a minute.